Afternoon, I will call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee for the Metropolitan Council. It is March 4th, 2024. I'm Robert Lilligan, the chair of this committee, joined by a quorum, so we can go ahead and do the committee's business. Committee members, the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda, and unless there is changes or comments, I'll consider it approved. We have an agenda. Next on the agenda is approval of the February 20th, 2024 Community Development Committee meetings. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, council members Lindstrom and Wolf. Any discussions, additions, corrections on the minutes? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next, we will move on to our first business item, which is on our agenda. It's business item 2024-71. It's a public hearing on the City of North Oaks Red Forest Way South Comprehensive Plan Amendment Plan Modification. Just some background. The city submitted the Red Forest Way South Comprehensive Plan Amendment. The amendment's purpose is to expand the Metropolitan Urban Service Area, or MUSA, to include properties in the Red Forest Way South development. That's 23 parcels with 24 sewer connections across 72.2 net acres. The purpose of the amendment is to connect these parcels to regional sanitary sewer. Council staff presented this item to us here in this committee on February 5th. Staff found that the proposed amendment was more likely than not to represent a substantial departure from the Metropolitan Wastewater System Plan and are recommending that the city modify the comprehensive plan amendment. Procedure for requiring a plan modification are directed by the Metropolitan Land Planning Act, which requires that the council hold a public hearing as part of its consideration on whether to require the city to modify its plan. Today's meeting is to hold that public hearing and provide an opportunity to hear from city representatives and other interested parties. The committee will not take action today. Deliberation and action on this item will occur at a future Community Development Committee meeting. I will clear committee members. Cool. I will open the public hearing. We welcome public comments and are here to listen. The committee will not be asking questioners of the commenters. After we hear from the city, I will call other registered speakers to come forward to make your comments. I have a list that has, well, these are all the advanced people, correct, Michelle?
Those are the people that signed up.
That have signed up. It says 4, but we'll give the opportunity for others to testify as well. So first up, I'd like to welcome Kendra Lindahl from the City of North Oaks. We will be giving the city 20 minutes or so, 20 to 30 minutes to speak on the issue. You'll see materials from the city were also posted with the agenda, and they have a presentation as well. So I would welcome Kendra. Kendra, thanks for being here. You can stay and sit, whichever you're most comfortable.
I'm going to talk for a while, so I'll.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right.
We do have a presentation, and my understanding from Eric is that someone in the back will advance the slides for me. So
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for commissioners, for the opportunity to be here on behalf of the City of North Oaks. I am Kendra Lindahl. I am the city planner. We do have a request for a comprehensive plan amendment, and I have submitted a letter that was included in your packet, and just want to highlight a couple of the key, what we think are the key issues with our request. So if you could go to the next slide in the back.
Let's just verify.
I think you can use that.
Okay.
Great.
All right, I got it.
Thank you.
So we have been working at the city. We did submit a comprehensive plan amendment earlier this year and have been working with staff for the last 7 months or so. We met with them before submittal and after submittal throughout the process to try to outline what was going to be coming in and why, and identify a path forward. Again, we think it's interesting that staff is suggesting that this is a plan modification. Something that does not happen very often at the Met Council. We really do think it's a plan amendment where the city does have the discretion to modify the plan to allow us to connect 23 lots to sanitary sewer, which we believe is outlined in our 2040 comprehensive plan, which was approved. The request is to add, and it's a little hard, but you have this information in your packet, 23 lots on 72 acres to the MUSA on the east side of the city. The 2040 comprehensive plan approved by the council and authorized to implement did say specifically that this area could be connected to sanitary sewer. So from a city perspective, we feel like since 1998, we've been anticipating this connection. And I say 1998 because approval of our 2020 comprehensive plan was tied to what we call the East Oaks PDA, which is the development for just about 1,000 acres in the city, the final pieces of land to be developed in North Oaks. And in 1998, the Met Council acknowledged that the density is inconsistent with regional strategy and represents a departure, but not a substantial departure. And we contend that the same is true today. Our land use plan shows that the city is mostly developed. The piece of land that we're talking about is guided, our low-density residential, the yellow area, like the rest of the majority of the city. But really, I'm here because there is no other city like North Oaks. There's no other city in the region like North Oaks. The city began as a water source for St. Paul. It was a water utility. Somebody was creative entrepreneur, and he bought the land in the 1800s, in 1865, created a water supply system for St. Paul. And the land was later purchased by James J. Hill as an innovative agricultural farm, and that worked as a farm for many years. And in 1950, his descendants established the company, the North Oaks Company, to plan for a private conservation residential development. The idea of the city, which was not yet a city, of the development was to preserve land and protect the natural resources and water bodies in the city. And so in 1956, after the city was already planned through the company, the city was actually incorporated as the city of North Oaks. And then years later, the Met Council was established. And again, as you all know, one of the primary missions of the Met Council was to deal with failing septic systems and wastewater impacts. So very quickly, 5 key issues I want to touch on is that this does not set a precedent. Staff mentioned that in their comments 2 weeks ago, or whenever that meeting was, a few more than that, I guess. It will not set a precedent, and the council can feel confident that you're dealing with the policy issues that are unique to North Oaks. The action supports environmental protection. When you look at the plans in there for these 23 lots, they're very close to significant water bodies, and we really think it would be irresponsible to put them on septic systems when a wastewater treatment system is there and has capacity. And it is not a substantial departure from the plan. You've said that as a council before, and nothing has changed. Then lastly, you do have the legal authority to approve the plan as submitted, and I'll talk a little bit about each of those items. So the East Oaks PDA was discussed in the comprehensive plan. This is a map from the comprehensive plan. In the text of the comprehensive plan, we talk about connecting it to sewer and water. The city is almost fully developed. This is the last subdivision in the city. And when I say that, it's different than in other cities where I work, where redevelopment is possible. We have deed restrictions that run with the land that prohibit further development. Those deed restrictions were established in the 50s. And certainly while they're not consistent with how we develop land today, they do run with the land and have been there for more than 70 years. And the city does not have the ability to vacate those deed restrictions. So under those deed restrictions and the master plan for this community, this is the last subdivision. These are the last 23 lots to be platted in the city. The other reason it's not like other cities is we have 900 acres in conservation land. You see that on the the different maps I've had up, that's 16% of our community in permanent conservation. And what makes it a little bit interesting is that we can't count that towards our density. So it's land we can't use. There's a policy, it's not a law, it's not in the statute, but there's a Met Council policy that says we can't take credit for that when we calculate density. If this were any other city that had a conservation easement over land, it would be preserved and be able to be deducted. But in this case, we've met with staff and they believe it's not consistent with the Met Council policy. Again, if you look at that policy, I think you will find that we are at 3 units an acre, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So environmental protection. The city was founded, as I said, on a vision of environmental protection. Streets were designed to protect trees and water bodies, and the current request is really just continuing that conservation vision of our founders and the Hill family. The sites will be developed, and they can be developed with septic systems. However, the wastewater system is 400 feet away, and it seems irresponsible not to pursue the action outlined in the comprehensive plan to connect to the sanitary sewer system when it's that close. Connection, we believe, is the responsible choice to protect natural resources. There is adequate capacity in the lift station and in the regional system. The St. Paul Regional Water Supply serves St. Paul and 14 other communities with water from North Oaks. That's almost 500,000 customers. And so I genuinely say we take seriously water protection in North Oaks, not only for ourselves, but for you all with your water bottles here today. Limiting the use of septic systems in sensitive areas does protect water supply. That's simply a fact. And so when we have the ability to connect in a situation like this, we want to pursue the option to do so. The Met Council's policies note that septic systems should only be used when access to municipal sewer and water is not available. And in this case, it is literally 400 feet away. It is available, and we believe it's responsible to connect to that system. It has the capacity for the 23 lots. It has more than adequate capacity for the 23 lots. Since the system was designed, we've instituted in the region that shares that lift station water resource management tools, and there is significant capacity in that lift system and in that interceptor. There's a joint powers agreement in place between the City of North Oaks and White Bear Township intended to serve this land. That is in the joint powers agreement. Again, we say this is not a substantial departure. We've reviewed the statutes. We've included that in our letter. The statutes specifically, not the statutes, excuse me, the comprehensive plan in 2020 specifically noted that this city did not meet the density requirements, acknowledged that, encouraged the city to try to increase density, but noted then it was not a substantial departure from the system. And that remains true today. In the city's effort to connect to the sewer system, we're simply asking to implement what we believe is in our comprehensive plan when we say we will try to connect lots in the East Oaks PDA to the sanitary sewer system. And that's what this is. We're simply asking to be able to implement what we believe our comprehensive plan says today. And then lastly, we do believe that the city does have discretion, or excuse me, the council does have discretion to implement the city's request. The staff report outlined 3 options for you, but what they didn't outline is the 4th option that I think you do have, which is to approve the comprehensive plan amendment to reclassify this property to bring it into the MUSA and allow us to connect to sanitary sewer. The legal authority in the statutes that were referred to is a may. It's discretionary. You have discretion to use common sense and move forward with this application if you so choose. The council discretion on substantial departure, this is a policy document, but again, in the past, the council has already acknowledged that we don't meet the density, but it's not a substantial departure. 23 lots in the Twin Cities Metropolitan region is not a substantial departure. It is our last subdivision. We won't be back, but we think it makes sense to connect to the sanitary sewer for these final lots in the city when the pipe is literally right there. So again, in closing, the city of North Oaks is unique. It was intended to protect natural resources, and that's what we're here to do today. The unique conditions make it impossible for us to meet the Met Council density goals because of the covenants on the land. This is not true of any other city in the 13-county region. It is not true of another city in the state. It is a unique circumstance, and that's why we have policies, to be able to react to individual circumstances. And in fact, if we were able to calculate density by deducting park dedication, we've done the math. We are at 3.1 units per acre. If we could deduct the parkland that we can't use that is protected by covenants in the city, we are at 3.1 units an acre if we remove the historic farm lot on the site. And so again, I say that just to simply say that this is consistent with the intent of the policy. This is not a substantial departure, and the statutes give you the authority to approve the request, acknowledging the uniqueness of the city and setting aside any concerns about precedent. So with that, we ask that the Community Development Committee use the discretion granted to you by state statutes and Met Council policy to support our request to allow this final subdivision in the city of North Oaks to be added to the MUSA based on the unique circumstances in our community. And I thank you for your time, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Lindell, thank you for your presentation. Thanks for your orderly and thoughtful way of presenting the city's position. It's much appreciated. Yeah, thanks. And as I said at the beginning of the public hearing, we don't question our testifiers today. We'll have an opportunity to discuss an upcoming Community Development Committee meeting. And we invite, of course, the city to attend that meeting as well and participate in that conversation. So I have folks that have signed up that are pre-registered to speak. Individuals will have 3 minutes to comment. If you're representing an organization, you'll have 5 minutes to comment. Michelle will be our timekeeper, correct?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. When you speak, please state your name for the record, your place of residence, and what organization you represent, if any. And then please share your comments with us. And the order, I'll go on the order that I have on my list of registered speakers. And then again, if there's someone here who didn't have an opportunity to sign up, of course, we'll have opportunity. You'll be able to speak at the end of this list. So first on the list, I have from the city of North Oaks, Kevin Kress. Kevin, welcome.
Good evening, folks.
Good
I'm
evening.
actually going to pass. I'm going to turn my time over to, I think, Mark Hauge or one of our other colleagues.
Okay, and that, sure, sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Kress. So then why don't we just move, and then Kendall Lindell was on the list, and you've already spoken, Ms. Lindell. So, Mr., is it Howdy, is that it? Howdy, Mr. Howdy. Mark, please come up. Welcome. Please state your name and residence for the record.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mark Hauge. I'm the president of North Oaks Company, and I'm here representing the Hill family. Our offices are in North Oaks. I happen to reside at 4631 Lake Avenue in White Bear Lake. I am here to reiterate some of the things that Kendra alluded to and speak on behalf of the family and their very strong desire to develop a unique place in North Oaks. A lot of the precedent started before James J. Hill purchased the property by virtue of us having to agree to allow St. Paul Regional Water to use the majority of the lands to convey water for originally the city of St. Paul, and then now there are 14 communities that are served by this system. We are currently working, that is the city and North Oaks Company with St. Paul Regional Water, to expand that water system to help alleviate what has emerged as a major challenge to get enough potable water for the cities in the Northeast Metro. So by virtue of this effort and our desire to make sure that we can maintain a good environment and the quality of water, we want to start converting or doing as many of our developments with septic systems as possible. As Kendra pointed out, this is the last area the company and the family can develop. You might ask, what are we going to do after we finish this project? We have lands in Lino Lakes and White Bear Township that we are beginning to work on, which Louis Hill Jr. acquired in some part to protect the investment he made in North Oaks. But this is the last area that we can develop in North Oaks. And you may recall also that the company has developed every single lot but for about 100 lots that were associated with a property owned by a group of sisters in a religious order that was sold to a third party. But they have tried to shepherd this process along and really worked hard to protect the environment. And the last round was to preserve the 900 acres, which also is a great insurance for climate resiliency. We recently hired a gentleman from the Department of Natural Resources to work on behalf of the family as its Director of Conservation Programs, so they are very serious about this effort. We also received a letter from the Minnesota Land Trust, and we have a letter coming from St. Paul Regional Water Services to basically reinforce what we're saying here today, so we'll provide that to the committee and the council at some later date. We have the letter from Minnesota Land Trust. We anticipate a letter from St. Paul Regional Water Services today yet or tomorrow.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Hardy, for your testimony. Thanks for being here. We look forward to getting those correspondence from the other interested parties. Thank you. That was the last name that I had pre-registered to speak. So if there's anyone else that wanted to speak during the public hearing, now would be the time to step forward, please. Anyone? Anyone? Seeing none, thank you for attending, for participating in this public hearing. More conversation to come. Again, I hope you can join us. Then I will now close this public hearing. Public comments on this item must be received by 5 p.m. on March 13th, 2024. As a reminder to comment on the proposed plan modification, members of the public who are listening may provide public comment in the following ways. You can write to us here at the Met Council, 390 Roberts Street North, St. Paul, 55101. You can fax at 651-602-1313. You can email us here at public.info@metc.state.mn.us. Public.info@metcouncil, that's metc.state.mn.us, or you can record a public comment on the public comment line at 651-602-1500 or TTY at 651-291-0904. At the close of the public comment process, Met Council staff will prepare a summary of the Met Council comments. At the committee's next meeting, which is on March 18th, 2024. Is that our committee's next meeting? It seems so far out. Okay, thanks. All right. This committee will review the hearing record, consider the staff proposal, and take action to forward the committee's recommendations to the full Met Council. On March 27th, 24, the governing body of the Metropolitan Council will consider those recommendations and take action on the city's proposed comprehensive plan amendment. So thanks again for being here, and we will now resume the remainder of our meeting agenda. Great, thanks again. Next item is our consent agenda. It's the funding recommendations for the Livable Communities Demonstration Account grants. And I'm wondering if that isn't supposed to be 2023. And,
Looking at Sarah,
okay, it says 2022 on the agenda. I'm assuming,
it must be.
yeah, okay, anyway. That's business item 2023-291. Yep, 2023, it says in the staff recommendation. It's just a typo on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, there's four of them, I guess, four seconds. Did you grab one, Michelle? Thank you. Discussion, hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, that carries, and we'll move on to our non-consent agenda. The first is item 2024-36. It's Scott County's Sand Creek Township Valley View Drive Corridor Comprehensive Plan. And we have Raya Esmaeili to present. Welcome, Ms. Esmaeili.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, I'm Raya Esmaeili. I'm a planning analyst in the local planning assistance, and I am sector rep for District 4 and 11, which includes all of Carver and Scott counties. Before you here today, we have the Sand Creek Township Valley Drive Comprehensive Plan Amendment, which is submitted by Scott County as the planning authority for the townships within the Scott County. This is figure 1 of your staff report, which kind of shows the regional system around the amendment site. There are, as you can see, there aren't any specific regional systems. There's a highway right by close to where the amendment site is, but otherwise away from the other system components. This is figure 2 of your staff report, which shows the community designations of the site. This area is currently designated as, I think it's diversified rural, and, there's no recommendation for a change in community designation or anything. So the amendment details is that the amendment site is a total of 430 acres. That's along Highway 169 and Valley View Drive. The proposal is to change the land use of the site from urban business reserve to rural business reserve, transition area, and parks and open space. So there's a mixture of land uses that are being proposed for the site. The overall developable area is not the entire 430 acres, it's more like 100. And the main change from urban business reserve to rural business reserve is for the intensity of the business development that is being recommended for the site, which is basically to accommodate some business uses and outdoor storage with on-site septic and wells on the site. So this is figure 3 of the staff report, which shows the current and proposed plant land use that I was mentioning. On the left, you have the current land use guiding, which shows the urban business reserve, and on the right, you see the mixture of the land uses with that rural business reserve, transition, and park and open space, which is a small triangle on the northern part. There is a forecast change recommendation associated with this amendment, which pertains to the employment forecast, as highlighted in this table, which is the table 1 of the staff report. So there is basically a change to the employment forecast for all 3 years of 2020, 2030, and 2040, as underlined in this table. This amendment highlighted a compatibility concern with adjacent jurisdictions, specifically the city of Jordan. This area is right outside of the boundary of the city of Jordan, with basically a parcel between the boundary of the city and where the site is located. The city and the Sand Creek Township don't currently have an orderly annexation agreement. They have not been successful in establishing an OAA for this area, so it's outside of the planning jurisdiction of the city of Jordan. However, the city's long-term water and sewer expansion expectations include this area, and to serve the northeastern growth boundary of the ultimate growth of the city of Jordan that they have been planning for. And so they strongly believe that there will be an impact on the city's future growth, and if this area were to develop as rural service. And the city did as well, at the end of last year, adopt a resolution that extends the city's subdivision ordinance into this area under Minnesota statute that allow a city to do that if there's an unincorporated community that does not have an adopted subdivision ordinance. That is something that the city of Jordan and Sand Creek Township will have to address at the local level, completely outside of the jurisdiction of the Metropolitan Council, because they pertain to local controls. And we did talk with both during this time, especially last year. We had conversations, council staff had conversations with both the township and the city of Jordan. We did suggest an approach for water and sewer provision through an intercommunity service agreement to allow for this area to develop at a higher intensity with both water and sewer being provided by the city of Jordan, which unfortunately did not move forward. The parties did not take that suggestion up. And as well as, there's something else I want to say. So that unfortunately didn't move forward. So the plans remained as is with this area to develop at that rural service development proposed. The city of Jordan, without an OAA, the city any city can annex areas outside of the city without an OAA by resolution. However, the city of Jordan has not been able to do that because there's not a willing property owner. There's the property owner that is just adjacent to the boundary of the city that does not include this site does not want to become part of the city at this point, and for annexation by ordinance, they would need to have that contiguity geographically. So the annexation by ordinance has not worked out either. So that's where the compatibility issue specifically stands. However, this area is outside of the Metropolitan Council's service area. There have been previously indications for potential expansion of service into this area, long-term service area. However, those plans are not for the near future. For those specific purposes, we do rely on the local comprehensive plans to specifically indicate expansion of service and or takeover of the local facilities, basically within their comprehensive plan, which was not the case here. And therefore, the review of the staff here at the council, specifically our environmental services staff, has indicated that there is no impact to the metropolitan service area and specifically the metropolitan system plan. Therefore, the issue remains at a compatibility level, which in terms of the council's jurisdiction falls under convening, that's where our jurisdiction stands between conformance, consistency, and compatibility. So because of that, we have found that the proposed amendment does conform to the regional system plans, is consistent with council policies. It is incompatible with the City of Jordan's long-term plan for provision of water and sewer outside of its jurisdictional boundary, but it won't have any impact on other adjacent jurisdictions. And because of that, our proposed action is to authorize Scott County to place its comprehensive plan amendment into effect, revise the county's employment forecast upward as shown in Table 1 of the staff report, and advise the county, to implement the advisory comments in the review record specifically for regional parks and transportation. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mrs. Esmaeili. And before I ask the committee members if you have any questions, I will note that these compatibility issues have kind of bubbled up, and I've been approached by both Councilmember Barber, who represents the area, Councilmember Wolf, who's been engaged in the conversations, and I know that Councilmember Wolf is going to want to speak in a moment. Also, we've been joined by the mayor of Jordan, Mike Franklin. Thank you for being here, and I'll invite you up in just a moment. Yeah, Ari, please be seated. And also, we were joined by a representative of Scott County, Brad Davis, who's indicated he's here to answer questions, but not looking to speak. But first, I think I would turn to Councilmember Wolf. Did you want to say a few comments before we turn to the mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really a tough one for me. Scott County usually has a great relationship between all of the different levels of government. With scale, they meet once a month and talk things through, and I'm used to good communication and people working together, and this project is sort of an outlier from that. Deb and I met with both Sand Creek and Jordan and talked about this, and Sand Creek Township is very, very rural. They don't have much money or, infrastructure. It's a big township, but they don't have a lot of stuff. But that section of 169 that's right near the project has had a lot of accidents over the years. There's a lot of conflicts from things going from the rural level of traffic to a more urban level of traffic through that corridor. In fact, my son totaled his car in that area last year. Thankfully, he wasn't hurt. But so Sand Creek Township has been working on doing a backage road through that area, connecting things up and getting rid of some of the conflicts. Because of that work that they've been doing, it enables the development to happen there. And as Ms. Esmaeili said, there's a little skinny, like 30-foot wide piece of property that is preventing Jordan from annexing that property. It was an access point for another property, and that person doesn't want to sell. So that's keeping the ordinance or the annexation by ordinance process from happening. And the two communities are not really speaking to each other right now. So there's no orderly annexation discussions happening. And Jordan is actually willing to extend water and sewer now, but they want to annex the property in order to do that. They can't do that because Sand Creek Township isn't talking to them. And this is a very environmentally fragile area. The groundwater is very, very close to the surface, so there's a lot of danger of contamination of the aquifers because it's so shallow. In fact, there was a application to do gravel mining there that got turned down because they were afraid of what would happen to the aquifers to do gravel mining there. So I wish everybody was talking to each other, and they're not. We did have good conversations with everybody, but we've not been able to bring them together. And this property is challenging to develop because of all of the wetlands. The uses for outdoor storage and sort of light industrial kind of stuff is not ideal when you're surrounded by wetlands like that. It'd be really nice to have something that would be an asset for, like cool hotels or apartments or something, where it would be an asset to the community. But that's not what's on the table, and I did have that conversation with the chair of the Sand Creek Township Board that it's unfortunate that this will probably make it never happen. Because once you divide things up like that, it's a lot harder to get all of the property owners on board to do a redevelopment later. they're acknowledging that and still want to go forward. It's created an awareness of a hole in our wastewater system plan, in the water policy plan, in that for our system, we can protect it from having development that's incompatible with extending water and sewer in the future, but we don't have that in our plan for the long-term service areas for the rural centers. Nobody apparently thought about it up to now, which we should have, because the communities that are making that investment in a wastewater system at a local level need the same assurance that we do, that once you make that investment, there's going to be the connections for the long-term service. There were concerns expressed by some of the other mayors in Scott County. Kurt Briggs from Prior Lake, Mayor Briggs was very concerned about this. The city of Belle Plaine is concerned about it because it might change the dynamic with the townships around them in terms of being able to extend their service and pay for the system that they've already put in place. They've got some big bills in Belle Plaine to pay for their system that's planned for future expansion. So we're gonna need to do some work on the environmental services side of things to protect those regional or those rural center communities that have made this investment, that they have the same protection that people who are connected up to our larger metropolitan system have. I think I covered most of it, but I'm happy to turn it over to the mayor to speak further.
Great, appreciate that. Any questions for Councilmember Wolf or staff before we turn it over to Mayor Franklin? Seeing none, we are happy to welcome Mayor Mike Franklin from the city of Jordan. Welcome, Mayor Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. And I was kind of ticking items off my list as Councilmember Wolf was going through some of the concerns that we've raised. She's done, and Councilmember Barber have done a great job engaging all of us. And it is true that ordinarily there's a high level of cohesion and compatibility within our jurisdictions within Scott County. In fact, one of the things we want to point out is that we believe this has precedential value that already is jeopardizing that and is jeopardizing that moving forward in a way that we believe should rise to your attention as a Met Council, as this would have impact on other communities. We believe it already is. We can serve this parcel, and we intend to, if we can annex it into the city, as has been mentioned. But we do want to point out a couple areas in which we believe this amendment would be incompatible with your Thrive MSP 2040 policies, specifically housing, your water resources policy plan, and your natural resources sustainability plan. On the housing plan, any of this amendment could hinder our ability, but again, if the precedent holds, all cities in our position to achieve these orderly annexation agreements. We're seeing a great diminution. It might be just because it's in this narrow term, but it could be long-lasting of cities and townships and growing area like Scott County to collaborate. In fact, our request to the county was to send this back to deny it, specifically so that we could continue our orderly annexation conversations with the township. Who knows how those would have turned out, but without this parcel, there isn't much reason for either of us to meet up at this point in time, despite our having attempted to do that. So it is a question of precedent and incentive, and what incentive would these townships have in a growing place like Scott County to engage when we might have these decisions being made on a one-off basis. We think that this will have a profound impact on our city's ability to meet our population and employment forecasts. We've effectively now got a block on growth on our north side. We have one other area really where we can grow, but there's nowhere else to grow but up, I suppose, within our city limits. We're landlocked in a lot of literal ways, but this sort of puts an additional landlock on our ability to accommodate those population forecasts and employment, as to say nothing of affordable housing. I'll go fast because I realize I only have a couple minutes, but on our water resource planning as well, one of the chief pushbacks, feedback we've got from our council members as well as other cities in Scott County is the sort of nature of comprehensive planning in general. You know, we've gone through this exercise, and for this, with this parcel, had this designation for, I believe, 3 consecutive comprehensive plans, and have planned accordingly for our water resources. It's worth pointing out that the subject property here is 350 feet from our water treatment facility. And so to suggest that we couldn't serve the facility and wouldn't be the highest and best use, we think is flawed. We think that development of this site with private wells and septic, is contrary to the implementation strategies that you have in your Thrive MSP 2040 because of our ability to serve the property. We think also the plan is inconsistent with Scott County's comprehensive plan goals. Specifically V1, and this Councilmember Wolf did a great job laying out that this sort of ensuring compatibility and functional relationships. I think we've almost beat that one to death, but it's definitely had an impact on our county's ability to, so if you will, work and play well together. But land use zoning, we don't believe, this is a line from the Scott County comp plan, should not be changed simply to accommodate a proposed use, but should be established and maintained to the extent necessary to ensure compatibility of adjacent land uses. You've heard about how this would create that incompatibility from our perspective. Within these urban expansion areas, the county and the townships, this again from their plan, shall discourage premature development, subdivisions, or land use patterns that may obstruct the logical future extension of utilities. Both Councilmember Wolf and I have discussed our ability to serve with municipal utilities essentially right away. So we think for these reasons, that goes against the Met Council's Thrive MSP 2040 plan. A couple thoughts too. The commercial use that Councilmember Wolf opined on, if we maintain this as an urban business reserve, that is a possible use. If we go into a rural business reserve, that becomes an impossibility as we go forward, and a practical impossibility as we get into a cycle of having to replace, septic systems, however long those systems last. And then a few thoughts, and I'll close. And we do have city staff, our city administrator, and city planner here if there are questions that I can't answer, which is most questions. But thoughts on some of the staff report, and it's been great working together on this. But our wastewater services, the council's system plan does not reflect regional service to either the city or township within the 20-year planning horizon. Well, that's true, but the longer-term plan has included this area for some time. So looking at effectively the next 15 years is maybe not the right measure when we're talking about buildings and infrastructure that will last considerably longer than that. And so if it's reasonable, and we think it's reasonable as demonstrated by the Met Council's indications to us that this eventually will be in your jurisdiction, maybe even within, not shortly after the 2040 plan, I just want to point that out and have that on your minds. I've mentioned the impact. There's a statement, and we heard the statement that it would not have an impact on other adjacent communities. We disagree with that wholeheartly. We think that other communities are actually already seeing an impact of the precedential value of this decision. And on the inter-community service agreement, great suggestion, but as has been commented on, there's not a lot of incentive for everyone to get in the same room. We would think that would be potentially a good compromise point should this amendment fail and we go back to the drawing board. Items like that could come back onto the table between the city and the township. So in closing, we think this is really bad precedent, not just for Scott County, certainly for Jordan, but other Scott County communities and perhaps even townships in your jurisdiction in terms of encouraging orderly annexation agreements. We think that would be a real travesty if we stood in the way of that healthy, mature development. We believe this is inconsistent with the whole exercise of comprehensive planning. We have like I say, consistently designated this property guided for future city, and for this change to happen significantly impacts us. So we respectfully request that the committee recommend rejection of this comprehensive plan amendment and send us back into the room to work together. And I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee members may have, as well as our staff.
Thank you, Mayor Franklin, for being here. Thanks for your testimony and for laying out your arguments. Any questions for Mayor Franklin or the City of Jordan staff that's here, or Mr. Davis from Scott County?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, please, Councilmember Johnson.
And maybe this is a county question. So just from my own background in city government, was at the county level, was there an opportunity where a moratorium could have taken place if the county Lebanon comp plan change, so that there could be more time to evaluate this, or were they under the 180-day timeframe, 90 to 180-day timeframe that the law permits? I just know moratoriums could be a tool, but it has to sit with the entity that retains that authority, and I'm not sure that that can take place with an active application, but I'm just curious about that.
Mayor Franklin, I saw you looking, or Mrs. Smiley.
I was going to say, I think Mr. Davis probably
Is
can
that
answer
a-
that question.
I was thinking that's a Scott County question.
All right, I think
Mr. Davis, thanks for being here. Please identify yourself for the record.
Yeah, Brad Davis, Planning Director from Scott County. Thank you for your question. The county would have the ability to do a moratorium on comprehensive plan amendments and then the subsequent rezoning. The county did not take that action for this particular item. When the application came in, we did process it under the 60 and 120-day statute requirements and did the public hearings, got a planning commission recommendation, and then it went to the county board for approval, preliminary approval, and then that then brought it up to the Metropolitan Council. So we followed the same process as we have with the other 4 or 5 comprehensive plan amendments.
Okay. And Mr.
Councilmember
Chair,
Johnson.
was that an option that was offered up by anybody to consider? I'm just curious, knowing that, everybody's trying to work together on this, it sounds like, but there are competing immediate but also very important long-term interests that are very substantial. So I'm just wondering if that was fully vetted and if the county understands fully, what's going to be, I think, in some ways foist upon, Jordan, but potentially by precedent, other communities. And if I may just put a pin on that for a minute, I think in our report, when it said other communities impacted, I'm thinking surrounding communities by this action, but certainly there is the precedent that could show up in future staff reports based on this action today. And I'll come back. I'm curious about the county's mindset when they were looking at this.
Yeah,
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The county board, at no point, to my knowledge, ever considered a moratorium on comprehensive plan amendments. I don't recall that ever being discussed or an option that was proposed or evaluated. The county is aware of all the comments that have been received and are aware of the difficult position that's put the 2 jurisdictions in. Ultimately, that then went to a planning commission recommendation and a county board that voted 5-0 to approve it. So I think all these facts were known during that public process.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further questions, Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on Councilmember Johnson's question. The Planning Commission was divided. It passed by 1 vote at the Planning Commission, and they did not take any public testimony at the county board. I spoke with the county administrator after all of this when it came to us, and the county board at the time saw this as sort of a one-off situation that wouldn't affect anybody else, not kind of seeing it the way that we do of making challenges for other areas where there's a rural center next to a township trying to figure out the future.
Thank you. And Councilmember Wolf, for some of us who aren't as familiar with the intricacies of the local government, when you say planning commission, you mean the Scott County?
The Scott County
Okay.
Planning
So
Commission.
that was a split
because
decision, then it
in-
went to the board for unanimity.
In Carver County and Scott County, the
Perfect.
land use in the townships is done by the county.
Yep, cool.
So it
Thank
goes
you.
through County Planning Commission and then County
Great.
Board.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Any other questions? Or, yeah, Councilmember Johnson.
And Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yeah, please.
Raya, how much time do we have to make our decision as a Met Council under state law?
Ms.
What's the
Smiley.
deadline?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I have to get back to you on that date, but I'm trying to think, I didn't include it in here, but we certainly in calculating our 60-day, which is basically from January, we would have to take action within that 60-day unless we extended another 60-day. And that first 60-day ends, I think, in 2 weeks, which is why it is coming to this CDC and then scheduled for the Metropolitan Council action at the very end at the next week's
Mr. Chair.
council meeting.
And Councilmember Johnson, if that's, we have Ms. Torres here who may be able to give.
And I was, if we could get the exact date, and just, I'm used to also seeing those deadlines on the reports, because that was always a big deal at city. If you don't approve it by or deny it by, it will become as they want without any changes, and that was with development. So I'm just curious
While we're
about that.
talking. I can look it up while we're talking, Councilmember Johnson, but it is, like, basically, this was kind of the last CDC that we could have come to.
And Mr. Chair,
Councilmember
then
Johnson.
to get the extension, and I said 9180, I thought it was 9180. Did the state change to 6120, whatever? So is it, do we have the ability to extend it, or do we have to get the applicant to agree to extend it?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, we do extend it whenever we are unable to schedule the meetings. Usually, we don't, we only extend it when it seems like we are unable to get on the agenda for the CDC meeting or the council meeting, because we determine that deadline or that 60-day or the extension to another 60-day of 120, basically, after the amendment has already been considered as complete. If the amendment isn't complete, we don't even get to this calculation. So it's at that point past the completeness determination, and it's a matter of scheduling the meetings and or preparing the staff report. The jurisdiction can always, and we have worked with jurisdiction during comp planning process, that they have requested for some deadline extension, but that is related to the 15 business day, which is the completeness determination deadline.
Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Johnson.
Sorry, we're in the weeds, but it matters, because
Yeah.
everything, timing matters. So when I hear you say by practice, we are able to extend if we can't get something on a calendar, and that is authorized under law specifically? It must be?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, that is my understanding that the 60-day is our timeline, and then the council is allowed to extend it for another 60-day. And we try to, I apologize, we always try to do that within the first 60-day, which is slightly different than comprehensive plans that are directly going to the 120 days. For amendments, we do the 60-day.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, the reason I ask this is, yes, thank you. I'm just trying to find out the legality of if we have the ability to, ask for an extension to send it back and ask for some more consideration by the county. Should this body feel that there are serious impacts to surrounding communities, either by the specific plan that's coming forward or by precedent. And in fact, if we were ever to come and Met Council would expand the MUSA in this area, we too then would have, a vested interest in this, because we know how difficult that can be when we're coming into an area where past decisions make it very difficult to be efficient in the implementation of not just the infrastructure, but the investment that goes into it. So I'm just trying to find out, outside of practice, if that would be an opportunity for us tonight. And so.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Before I recognize Councilmember, Mrs. Esmaeili.
I was just going to add, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I just want to add that this is just related to the land use change, and there's still other local steps that would have to be taken for this development to move forward. So the land use change does not preclude additional conversations at the local level and any actions that can potentially be taken, and any change can always be reverted back.
Yes,
Thank you.
and Mr. Chair, to be clear, I very much understand that, and it always starts with land use, which is really the most important thing, because it's the cascade of everything else that's going to happen, which is why the mayor is sitting here tonight. So that's very clear for me, and I know that we're at the tail end of the process, so our authority is very narrow. But if more time could be needed and we could facilitate that in any way, I would be open to it, because I first of all, totally respect, the county's authority in this, and just understanding the process, I just want to make sure that within our authority, if we were compelled to do such, could there be more time granted under state law?
Thank you, Councilmember. And I did sort of put Ms. Torres on alert Got a little bit of a deer in the headlights look from her, but about being more specific about the date. Ms. Torres, please.
The current response deadline is April 26th. So we did extend that as far out as we can. Statutory timelines allow, as Raya mentioned, 60 days plus a 60-day extension. We don't have the ability to send it back to the county to say, think again. That's not what's described in statute. And so the county has made their decision and recommendation. They send that to us. We have a certain time in order to review that for consistency, conformance, and compatibility. Once we make our determination, we bring that to the committee for their consideration. But similar to how we were talking about North Oaks earlier, we have limited ability in statute to say no. We can determine that it requires a plan modification, or we can determine that it is consistent in conformance and may not be compatible, may not be consistent, but our authority to respond to those outside of conformance is very limited.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. Very helpful. I appreciate that. Further conversation, Councilmember Bento.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I probably have already heard the answer based on what Angela said, but I wanted to suggest that concept of having the Bureau of Mediation Services come in and try and work out an agreement between the parties. Given the potential impact of this, I think that relying on every possible tool would really be beneficial for the county, the city, and the township, and future efforts for other groups trying to work through these kinds of difficult discussions. So I don't know if there's anything we can do as a council to nudge that along, but I think bringing in the Bureau of Mediation Services to try and work out an agreement would be wise.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further questions for the mayor, city or county staff? Seeing none, again, thank you so much, Mayor Franklin, for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This actually has been my first opportunity to speak in public on this.
Yeah,
So,
oh, very good. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And I know that Councilmember Barber would like to say a few comments as well. So I'd welcome Councilmember Barber. Thank you for being here at committee today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I don't know if there's much more that I can add from the conversation Councilmember Wolf and Mayor Franklin have added. This obviously puts me in a very conflicted position because I represent the county, the city, and the township all in question. I don't know that more time or mediation would actually work in this particular circumstance. I believe we're in a position where, from a policy perspective, we don't have a lever to work with the communities for the kind of growth that we tend to look to as a region. You've heard Councilmember Wolf and I talk a lot about the importance of rural centers and what they mean, whether it's Waconia, Belle Plaine, Jordan. They're some of our fastest growing cities in the metropolitan region, and some of the conversations around USA and some of that don't work there, but they still have systems that they should be connecting for good growth. Because when you start putting everything on septic systems, one thing I think that any scientist or engineer can ultimately tell you is you put something like a septic system in, it's going to fail. It's going to fail at some point in time, and by the time it fails, no one's going to want to connect to it, to a broader system, whether it's a local system like Jordan or the regional wastewater system. And so I think we are in a position where we may not be able to say no to this. The city is aware that we've talked a lot, many times. So, and I'm very appreciative of their consideration and listening to us, and the township as well, of what our concerns were. But as a council, I think it's really important that we take a look at the long-term policy going forward, so that when we look at this, we work on a definition of regionally significant in a way that works and includes these regional centers, these rural centers, which I don't think we have done in the past. And I think that's what's put us in this very complicated position today. So thank you, and I appreciate our staff coming out with us to all the places, many different places. This has been a very complicated issue to work with. I do think it's precedent setting, so I do think there's some urgency upon us figuring out how to correct the policy.
Thank you, Councilmember Barber, for your involvement in this. Thanks, Ms. Esmaeili, as well. I can tell there's a lot going on here. I appreciate Councilmember Wolf's engagement in this committee as well. And I want to thank Mayor Franklin in the city of Jordan and the county as well. This is lifting up issues in policy that we do need to address. I would note that we're on the threshold of approving our 2050 regional design guidelines for Imagine 2050, so it gives us a great opportunity to lift up these rural center issues in that guiding policy document as well. So any further questions for staff or discussion? Yeah,
Yeah,
Councilmember
Mr. Chair, the
Johnson.
only thing I would say, which again is just to kind of maybe in my own mind put a period after the thought process, but if there is state law change that would need to go along with this additional policy change, that everything that we do, everything the cities do, we're just creatures of the state. I like to remind people of that because we're creatures. But, if there's something that we need to work on with, the cities, the counties, the townships, because they're always good partners with us. And again, we totally respect that local control piece of it. But, again, if there's some work that we can be doing with the various lobbying organizations, it is really worth a look, I would think.
Agreed, well said. Thank you. Further discussion? If not, we do have a proposed action before us that we authorize Scott County to place its comprehensive plan amendment into effect, revise the city's employment forecast upward, and advise the county to implement the advisory comments in the review record. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a few more comments to make. I can do it either before or after the motion. It makes no difference to me.
You go for it.
Okay.
Thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. My apologies.
No, I wasn't sure if, because you kept saying about questions.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure if I had discussion. Like I said before, this is a frustrating one. I have fought for local control frequently on this committee, and this is unfortunately a case of local control doing something that I think is a really, really bad idea. And I was not able to convince all the parties to come back to the table and fix this. It has some bad implications for the actual property owners. Councilmember Barber just touched on it, but there are parts of the region where people have gone ahead and done things when they could have connected and they did something else. And then eventually when those septic tanks fail, nobody wants them. And there's a big danger here that this will develop. The septic tanks will work for a while. They might even get to their second, because you have to have 2 locations for your tank. So first one fails, you build another one. That one fails, and then you've got nowhere to go. And in a different landscape, they may find that Jordan says, no, we don't want you. We've got that going on in an area in Carver County where neighborhood did their own thing. Everything developed up around them. Now they have all failing septic tanks, and the communities around them said, no, thanks, it's not our problem. And so we're headed for potentially a very bad situation here, but it's legal. They have the local control to do something that doesn't make a lot of sense, unfortunately. So these are the kind of days that I hate, because I think the best value that we can add to the region is dealing on those edges between communities and helping people work together, and we were not able to do that this time. So with that being said, I will make a motion, even though I think it's a bad idea, I will make a motion for the staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you, council members. I appreciate the motion. I appreciate the sentiment as well, and I'm getting a sense that this will be something that we lift up as we go through the 2050 design guidelines establishment.
Chair, I did not hear who was second.
Councilmember Johnson, thank you. I appreciate it, council members. Just so we have a motion before us on the to approve the proposed action. Is there a discussion? Councilmember Johnson.
I'll just be brief. Thank you, Councilmember Wolf, Councilmember Barber, and everybody here tonight, and the folks who've come before. I could not agree more. I am always been about local control, and seeing this, I said, where does our authority lie? That's the most important thing I think anybody who's elected or appointed can understand, especially as soon as possible when you inherit the role of a public seat, because too many people think you can go above and beyond or do. That's why I was being very specific about dates and authority in my questioning. So with that, I do intend to vote for this, and I do hope that you know, this area can work together, and it is what it is. And, you know, I think it's frustrating as well, but I know my role, and tonight the locals have done their job, and I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion? And I do want to thank Mayor Franklin just for the spirit that you came here in, and I know this is probably frustrating for you. It's frustrating for several of us as you hear, but the spirit of sort of positivity, potential collaboration, going forward in a better way is much appreciated. It's not what we always hear here at the Met Council, so thank you. Seeing no further discussion on the motion, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. And we will continue to move through our non-consent business items. The next is 2024-15. It's Joint Committees item. It's our 2024 budget amendment. It's the carry forward for the first quarter, and you're not Heather Giesel, as it says on my agenda. So you're Amy Jungett?
Correct.
Great, oh, yay. Will present to us. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Amy Jungett. I'm a budget analyst for community development, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. So this afternoon, I'm here to present our budget amendment. As you know, these are a routine part of our annual budget process, and we come to you approximately quarterly as we need to adjust our operating and capital budgets. First, community development is requesting to carry forward $1,795,000 of expenses and funding into our 2024 operating budget. Funds will be used to complete 3 projects that have been initiated but were not fully expended in 2023. Those projects include the preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, the Climate Action Plan implementation, and Imagine 2050 development. This amendment will also carry forward $100,000 of unexpended 2023 budget authority into 2024 to continue work on the Metro HRA residential preferences study. So in addition to these carry forward items, we are requesting to amend the community development's capital program as well. First, we have administrative adjustments as seen in the administrative adjustment section. The project details for these adjustments can be found in the attachment 3 and represent projects where the funding has already been approved and is now being programmed to a specific project. Just as a reminder, there is no formal action to be taken on these administrative adjustments this evening, but we have included the adjustments for transparency purposes. The acquisitions that you'll see shown have been approved by the council through separate official actions at the recommendation of the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission, and the specific actions have been cited on page 2 of the business item. Lastly, the projects you see in this section have been reviewed for conformity with the Regional Parks Policy Plan. Moving on to the closing project section, we are removing just over $21 million in completed projects from the Parks Authorized Capital Program, and all of those projects are fully expended. Finally, in the operating budget, you'll see the carry forward projects mentioned earlier, as well as increases to the interdivisional cost allocations and salaries and benefits for both community development and Metro HRA. This includes 3 new FTEs for community development and 1 for the HRA division staff. So this amendment supports the Thrive outcome of stewardship by assessing future needs, responsible planning, and management of financial resources for the community development's capital program. This amendment will help advance stewardship and prosperity through monitoring development and growth patterns in the region. It will also advance sustainability by preserving affordable rents in the housing market and supporting climate change greenhouse gas mitigation planning. So the proposed action is that you authorize the 2024 Unified Budget Amendment as indicated and in accordance with the attached tables. Thank you, that's all I have at the moment, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Jungett, much appreciated. Questions on that report? Committee members, any questions? Hearing none, good work. I would entertain the motion that the Metropolitan Council authorize the 2024 Unified Budget Amendment as indicated in accordance with the tables attached to the report.
So moved.
Second. Thank you, Councilmembers Carter and Bento. Discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Zinnett. Next, non-consent, our final non-consent business item is 2024-73. It's a big one. It's an application to the Environmental Protection Agency's Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program Phase 2 implementation grants. We've already received, what, $1 million for this grant program, and now we're seeking the implementation dollars. And we have Eric Wychek here to present. Welcome, Mr. Wychek.
Yes, thank you, Chair Lilligren and committee members. It was meant to be Lisa Barajas, but she's up at the Capitol today, so I'm taking her place.
Thank you.
This item is to seek the council's authorization to apply for a Phase 2 implementation grant from the Environmental Protection Agency's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. Today I'll give an overview of the grant opportunity, the proposed project concept, and associated timelines. I'll also talk about alignment with our climate planning. And finally, I'll seek council authorization to apply for the grant. First, let's provide some background. Some of you might remember that the EPA is funding climate change solutions in both planning and in implementation. You might recall that in the, I think it was spring or summer of last year, the council sought authorization to apply for the Phase 1 planning grant. The council was granted that authorization by the council, and we received those funds of $1 million. And we have completed our first deliverable in that program, which was submitted last Friday. Through the planning grant and in partnership with local governments and regional stakeholders in 11 of the 15 counties of the Greater Twin Cities metropolitan area, we seek to identify strategies and collaborate on solutions. The map here on this slide shows the 11 counties outlined in dark blue that have opted into partnering on developing that climate action plan with us. Completing the Priority Climate Action Plan is the first phase and positions eligible entities covered by the plan to compete for competitive funding from the government in the amount of $4.3 billion. That's that Phase 2 implementation grant that we're applying for. We just submitted that first deliverable, like I said, on Friday, that Priority Climate Action Plan. Completing this first deliverable opens up the opportunity for eligible entities to compete for this Phase 2 round. And that's what we're currently asking for some help with. In addition, Council Policy F115-1, Income Grants Policy, allows for the Council to enter into agreements with other governments and organizations which provide income or grants to the Council which are consistent with the Council's missions and priorities. The policy requires that Council approval for grants exceeding $500,000, so that's why we're here today. This amount that we're going to be seeking in this Phase 2 will exceed that amount of money. For Phase 2 implementation grants, the EPA has identified the following objectives for this program: to implement ambitious measures to achieve significant cumulative GHG reductions by 2030 and beyond, to achieve substantial community benefits, particularly for low-income and disadvantaged communities who often bear the heaviest burden of climate change impacts, to complement other funding availability to maximize reductions in benefits, and then to advance policies and programs that can be replicated and scaled up across jurisdictions. This slide's a little bit busy, but I just include it because the EPA is making funds available across these 5 different tiers. And again, this is for that implementation money, with applications evaluated and selected on that tier-by-tier basis. The opportunity we're going for sits under that Tier D. So it looks as though the anticipated number of projects or grants that will be awarded will be between 6 to 30 projects in Tier D, and that's nationwide. So on to our project proposal. You've all been waiting for this. Okay. So the Equity Residential Decarbonization Proposal emerged from conversations and collaboration with our state and local governments and other partners, and hearing feedback from many during the development of our Priority Climate Action Plan. This grant proposal is being led by the state of Minnesota through the Pollution Control Agency, and includes several components. The first is expanding the Department of Commerce Energy Navigator program to serve communities statewide. And then next, we have creating a coalition of local governments as part of the first cohort of governments to hit the ground running by expanding their existing decarbonization programs. Organizing a coalition of tribal governments to advance residential decarbonization for tribal members in Indian country. And then launching a second local and tribal government cohort starting in year 2 of the development proposal through an open competitive process for local governments and open invitation for tribal governments. And then in green, you can see here, this is the part that the Met Council will administer, providing a grant program for private property residential decarbonization for communities in the 7-county metro area. And then finally, targeted workforce development to support decarbonization efforts and to hit the project goals for greatest emissions impact. So all of those other bullets there will be administered by the state with the exception of the one in green there, which would be administered by Met Council. Just to provide a little bit of context here, this slide shows some of the map and analysis that was part of our priority climate action plan that we just submitted last Friday. On the left map, the dark blue areas are identified as low income and disadvantaged communities using thresholds established by the EPA for this program. The details for that definition are laid out in the business item that you should all have access to. The map on the right shows the distribution of PM 2.5, which is a fine particulate suspended in the area. Breathing PM 2.5 can have significant impacts on health. This map shows how low-income and disadvantaged communities outlined in yellow coincide with some of the highest concentrations of that PM 2.5 in the region. Households in these low-income areas often experience some of the highest housing cost burden and energy cost burden in the region as well. One of the primary barriers identified for low-income and disadvantaged households in decarbonizing homes is the upfront cost. While a number of state and federal rebate programs exist to support offsetting costs, households with lower income struggle with financing the initial purchase and installation. And just to provide a little bit of context, weatherization efforts, some of you who've weatherized your home might know this, they can range in cost between $1,000 to $12,000 depending on what you're doing. And then the costs of partial or full space heating electrification can range from between $7,000 to more than $15,000. So these are pretty significant costs for householders. The residential energy use is a significant component of GHG emissions in our region. And despite huge improvements in reducing emissions in energy generation, particularly electrical energy generation, the energy sector remains the largest source of emissions in our region. In the metro area, retrofitting existing homes can considerably reduce energy consumption through efforts such as weatherizing and insulation, installing energy efficient windows, upgrading HVAC systems, incorporating smart technologies, and promoting electrification and air source heat pumps. On average, a national study has shown that a retrofitted single-family home will use 32% less energy compared to homes that have not received any retrofits. And a recent analysis by the City of Minneapolis on retrofitting 1 to 4 unit housing stock showed that emissions reduction potential of about 25% just for weatherization, and then between 49 to 55% emissions reduction for electrification and enhanced technology. Combined, those efforts could yield 75% emissions reduction per unit and huge cost savings for householders. This is where the project concept for this grant opportunity comes in. The council would lead an equitable residential decarbonization grant program for the 7-county metro. With the exception of Minneapolis and St. Paul, those 2 communities would receive a separate set of funds from the EPA through a grant proposal to expand existing programs. They already have existing programs, so they would have their own pot of money. The council-led program would focus on the remainder of the region. And we're asking for $30 million in total, with about $28 million set aside for private property grants for 1 to 4 unit size buildings. Like the council's private I&I program, which some of you are familiar with, grants would be made available to local units of government to support private property improvements. The EPA grant has a 5-year performance period, so our proposal is that we would spend year 1 in developing and hiring the staff, and developing the program and related materials and application processes, building our team, and identifying other needed resources for household and local government success. Grants would be made available in years 2 through 4, and year 5 would be the closing out of the remaining grants and compiling and completing required federal paperwork and reporting. You can see that if awarded, we would bring an additional three FTEs, 2 for technical assistance and 1 for grants administration, and then 1 temporary staff person in year 1 to support program development. As mentioned previously, as part of the grant program, Minneapolis and St. Paul will be in a separate cohort and receive funding. The council's program will focus on the rest of the 7-county metro. To really advance climate pollution reduction grants' goal of benefits for low-income and disadvantaged communities, we have 2 proposed priorities. One of them is residents located within low-income and disadvantaged community areas, those areas in blue on the map. And then we'll also target residences outside of those areas falling below the low-income threshold, in this case, 200% of the federal poverty level or 50% area median income. In the low-income and disadvantaged communities tract, we identified the potential for 83,000 eligible units that could be eligible for funds through local government application. By March 20, 2024, the council must submit a letter of intent to the state of Minnesota for inclusion in the overall grant application, confirming the council's participation in the coalition proposal for the program. By April 1st, the lead agency, which would be the state in this case, must submit a complete application package, which includes the project narrative, work plan, and project budget, in addition to related forms for federal grants. And then by July 1st, a memorandum of agreement would be signed by all members of the coalition and must be provided to the Environmental Protection Agency. The MOA documents that the partner organizations in this project have consulted with one another and are committed to fulfilling their respective roles and responsibilities to successfully implement the measures described in the application. And then finally, you can see that the grant would likely be made available in summer of 2024, and it would get off and running in October of 2024. I won't spend much time on these slides, but just to say that these do connect quite well with the adopted Imagine 2050 regional goals. I would like to obviously call out the climate change one here, where we lead on addressing climate change, but I would also argue that this particular project connects quite well with our region as equitable and inclusive by its focus on low-income and disadvantaged household energy burden. For the findings, the council has endorsed a draft equity definition. Equity means that historically excluded communities, especially Black communities, Indigenous communities, and communities of color, have measurably improved outcomes through an intentional and consistent practice of adapting policies, systems, and services, and spending so that they contribute to the repair of both historic and ongoing injustice. The council also has defined environmental justice as the right for all residents to live in a clean, safe environment that contributes to a healthy quality of life. And the council's role in this grant opportunity directly advances the regional climate goal and the council's frameworks for equity and environmental justice by ensuring that programs to reduce the impacts of climate change are directed to and benefit those communities that bear the greatest burdens of climate change. And then finally, the proposal is consistent with the council policy FM 15-1, which indicates that seeking funds needs to be consistent with the council's mission and priorities. Therefore, staff propose the following actions, and you can see them on the screen here. Develop a grant application and related materials as a partner agency with the state of Minnesota as the lead agency for the Equitable Residential Decarbonization Project to be submitted for Phase 2 implementation grants to the Environmental Protection Agency's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. Develop and submit a letter of intent to participate in the proposal as part of the application process. Negotiate and execute the memorandum of agreement with the state of Minnesota for participation within the grant, and then negotiate and execute any required agreements with the Environmental Protection Agency. And happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wycheck. And before I turn to the committee for questions, I do have a couple quick ones, if I may, please. And looking at the aggressive timeline on this application, I can only imagine that you and the whole team are working pretty aggressively to meet those. So thank you for that. And then throughout the report and in your presentation, I was trying to get my head around the jurisdictional dynamics going on here, right? The state, the region, we have counties outside of the region that are participating as well. Minneapolis, St. Paul would have their own allocation. So I get all that, and I think you did a great job of explaining it all. But the two questions that I still have related to this jurisdictional, the jurisdictional dynamics is one, do you know what the direct allocations to the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul would be?
That is a great question. I don't have that information in front of me, but I could probably get that for you.
All right. Yeah, I would be interested, please. And I assume they're part of the whole memo of agreement with the state and all the other participants. And then we would be administering our 7-county metro area where we have authority. Then who administers the 4 counties outside of who are signing on to the program with us, but are outside of our jurisdiction?
My understanding, based on how this has been written up, is that that would be the state that would administer the counties that are within our planning grant, but also they're also underneath the umbrella of the state grant too.
Great, thank you. And then the other is, and now I'm looking for what it means, but I heard a new acronym today, and so I assume they say LIDAC. So is that low income disadvantage? Is that a federal acronym? I just have never heard of it.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren. I was trying to avoid saying it because I just feel like there's too many acronyms. And it is a federal acronym that's been created specifically for the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant.
Okay.
And my understanding is it doesn't really differ too much from other ways the federal government has designated low-income communities.
Okay.
But that's the verbiage they're using for this particular grant.
Appreciate it. Yeah, new acronym. And I meant to tell the committee before at the beginning that Director Barajas is at the Capitol working on our behalf. So I appreciate you stepping in, Mr. Wycheck, to present. Further questions or discussion, Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for telling us where Director Barajas was, because I was kind of wondering what happened to her.
She's mysteriously disappeared. I meant to tell you at the beginning of the meeting. I forgot.
So in areas outside of the LIDACs, there's an income restriction, but there's no income restriction inside of the LIDACs. Why? I mean, it seems kind of weird if you're making, $150,000 a year, but you live in a neighborhood where people don't. Why should you be eligible for this program versus the rest of the metro?
Thank you, Mr. Wycheck.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Wolf. I might not be understanding this completely right, but my understanding is that I think that there are income restrictions within the LIDACs as well, but I'd probably have to get that verified with you. For instance, I mean, I'm not sure if I live within a LIDAC. I may well, but my understanding is I probably wouldn't be eligible for this program based on income and other means. So I'd have to verify that with you.
Yeah, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, to me, that's kind of important, because the way the slide reads, slide 10 says basically anybody in low-income communities, regardless of income, and then there's an income threshold in the other parts. So to me, that makes a difference.
Yeah, let me get back to you on that one. I think I'd like to get that confirmed. Thank you. That's a
Thank
good
you, Mr.
question.
Winter. Further discussion or questions? Councilmember Carter.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and it is very exciting. Looking forward to the option or the opportunity to have funds in the middle of the year to implement these exciting programs. I know it'll take a while to get things up and running. And this went really very fast. I see that there's funding, there are various funding possibilities, and you did talk through the green chart number 5 that showed the potential of our application and focused in then on the application for decarbonization programs with private properties in the $30 million range with us as lead and partnering with the state. I am wondering whether we still have opportunity working together with the state for the other pieces as well. And I may not have heard you say that, you may have. There were several other areas in the potential interest of the PCA for which we could have applied, other things like existing program expansion, as well as all the way up to workforce development programs and things of that sort. I am thrilled with our application and our leadership of that $30 million application. Are we also working with the state then as a partner in other areas of the potential application, which could be up to 500 million? I just wondered.
Yeah, thanks, Councilmember Carter. My understanding is that our team is working really closely with the state. I know that in the development of our priority climate action plan, we were looking at what they had in theirs, what they'd heard from stakeholders, what local governments wanted included in that PCAP, because my understanding is that anything that we can apply for funds-wise needs to be in the priority climate action plan. So I think that both the regions and the states has currently enough latitude to probably entertain a variety of these phase 2 grants. And I also know that the state is putting in probably for other things that we will be supporting them in, or we may be looking at allocating funds at the regional level. So I don't have exactly what those are.
We're not necessarily leading in those areas.
Yeah.
We could participate.
Yep.
That's great, and I'd love to know more about what they're looking at, if they're looking at all those areas or targeting in, just uncertain, and if in fact our climate action plan is such that we could benefit from and participate in other areas. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 things. So on the map, the 15-county area, if people are wondering what that is, that's the Metropolitan Statistical Area. And anytime we want to go in for federal grants, we've got to come in that way. And that's why Greater MSP represents the MSA, and the MSA changes over time too. It's defined by 50% or more of the people traveling into the core for work. So just for that, I learned that a while back, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. And then when I look at the areas that are LIDAC areas, and of course, I'm looking across the whole metropolitan region, and then I'm taking a look up in my neck of the woods. So curious, will there be some criteria by which we evaluate a residence or, up to 4 units per building for the longevity? And the reason I'm asking is in developing areas, it's not uncommon that neighborhoods were dispersed and maybe they were 2 acres, 5 acres, 10 acres, and pretty soon development comes along and they wipe the homes out and they put the new ones in. So as far as redevelopment, I mean, we can't control what people do with their homes, but I'm hoping that in some way we're planning ahead where we're investing in homes that will stay for the long haul. Because I've just seen neighborhoods in my area too that, investments don't happen after a while because they know they're going to be bought out. And so I just wanted to be thoughtful about that possibility. And hey, if people are going to stay, I'm saying stay in your home forever, whatever that means to you. But this is just hopefully, I think this money will go very quickly and be very popular. And I'm just hoping we get it for as long a term as possible in those homes and they maintain, for a long time, whatever that is.
Thank you. Mr. Wojcik, do you have a comment there, or?
Well, I think to respond a little bit to what Councilmember Johnson said, I think, a lot of this can be worked out within program development. How do we actually create the grant criteria and that sort of thing? And I imagine, I'm almost certain that we would be coming back through you all to weigh in on that, what that looks like. So thank you for your question.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I participated in a Zoom meeting this afternoon with about 40 local governments, the majority from the metropolitan area, but statewide. Lisa Barajas presented on this topic today, and I can report back that there was widespread excitement about this. Many of these cities are putting in their own money right now for similar type programs. Hopkins, Edina, Minneapolis Green Cost Share Program, Richfield, others. So they're excited about this. I do have a specific question about the technical assistance folks that we plan on hiring, if we get the grant, the 2 technical assistance providers. Is that technical assistance to cities that are giving out these rebates, incentives? Is it technical assistance to homeowners? All of the above? Do you know?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Lindstrom. I mean, I think typically we work most directly with local governments. So certainly we would want to sort of go out on a roadshow of sorts to really try to drum up interest in this program and hopefully get a lot of communities to sign on to this. But I think, part of this also, there's like 2 sides to every situation like this. You have the ground up, there might be a lot of interest from local residents and advocates also. And I could see them actually going to City Hall potentially and saying, we want to be part of this program. A lot of our local governments have environmental commissions. I could see them taking interest in this and maybe promoting it. So yeah, I do think that we would probably be working with a variety of stakeholders on the technical assistance side. We've certainly, in recent years on the climate work, we've expanded our technical assistance to serve a wider array of stakeholders outside of local government. So I imagine we would take a similar approach here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
And a quick question too, are we able through technical assistance or in some other fashion able to help those small cities that don't have a staff, maybe their staff is 1, 2, or 3 people, and a lot of them are the smaller communities that are fully developed and they were developed a long time ago, that probably could take advantage of this program? And then will there be also, I don't know if it's our role or through the grant process, first of all, there's a workforce shortage and, it's difficult to find anybody to come work on your house right now and the prices are skyrocketing. So is there any way to ensure too that, again, as the money goes into the vendors that are doing the work, that we can make sure that there's reasonableness in what they're charging so that we can make sure the money goes farther than, the market is the market. But, since it's federal grants, maybe there are some kinds of requirements that could be put in to make sure that we're dealing with vendors that are working with us.
Mr. Wojcik.
That's a great question. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. I think certainly you saw the workforce portion of this that the state would be administering. They've, in many other grant programs, they've put together a list of trusted vendors that have been fully vetted. So I think that would obviously be a part of this. So I think that's a really good question. On the technical assistance side, I do think that, one thing that we always try to provide to local governments is, increasing their capacity through technical assistance. So whether that's through provision of data or actually coming out and talking them through the benefits of this program, I think that that's going to be really key. I could see our research unit getting involved in this to maybe provide some data to local governments that don't have capacity to maybe they don't even have a handle on where energy burden might exist. So, that's something I could see us providing potentially in-house for them. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, just a quick follow-up on that, if I may, and then I'll be done. And if there's a way to have a virtual meeting maybe for those types of cities, so that they collectively understand each other and can convey what their concerns are, I think that would be very helpful. They'd know, can we even give this a shot, or are we out completely? And I'm sure you'd get a lot of good feedback from them.
Thank you.
Thank you. In further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom, and I'm going to seek a motion here.
Thank you. That very question was brought up this afternoon about the challenge small cities may have in administrating it. And Lisa, I believe, answered it by saying, we'll try to make things as simple as possible, number one. And then in further discussion, a staff member from a county said, oh, well, maybe if the money went to a county, then the county could administer it on behalf of smaller cities. So, and Lisa, I think, was open to that suggestion. So
Thank
to
you.
be determined.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember, very helpful. Any further questions? Seeing none, Mr. Wycheck has proposed a series of actions to authorize this grant submittal and work with our partners. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmembers Lindstrom and Carter. Discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Yeah, good luck. Committee members, we have two information items. I've been conferring with Ms. Smith, who's conferred with Ms. Lau as well. And so the second information item, we can defer without great injury here, correct?
Correct.
So we will likely defer the second information item, but we will get to the first one, which is the Housing Policy Plan Draft Objectives Review, and we'll see how far we can get on this. And we have Sarah Berkey and Hillary Lovelace here to present. Welcome, Ms. Lovelace, Ms. Berkey.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, I'm going to have to leave early, but I just want to assure both Sarah and Hillary that I will go back and take a look at whatever I missed. So
I
my
know.
apologies. I have a meeting in one of my new townships tonight.
I appreciate it. Thanks for representing, and I know you will watch this. So welcome, Ms. Berkey, Ms. Lovelace.
Hi, good evening, Chair
evening.
and committee members. I'm Sarah Berkey, Senior Manager for Livable Communities and Housing Policy, and I'm here for the last time tonight with a key member of our team on this work who will introduce herself.
My name is Hillary Lovelace. I'm a housing planning analyst here at the council. Yeah, for a few more days. We've brought together a couple of slides today to talk through our objectives in a little bit more detail than we did and when we last presented to Committee of the Whole a few weeks ago. The big questions we want to know about are there any objectives that could be combined, that you think would be better served if it was one thing instead of two separate things? We have 7 right now, which feels like maybe okay, maybe too many. We'd also love to hear how you would improve any of these approaches to address both regional goals and potential local concerns. And how does the policy respond with enough urgency and intensity to what you are hearing from our most vulnerable populations?
Thanks, and we'll try to move quickly through this because we know time is limited this evening. This is part of our overall Regional Development Guide, Imagine 2050 effort, of course, and you'll see us down in the blue, second from the right, from the left, the housing policy plan, and starting with the housing objectives that flow from our regional goals about equitable and inclusive, healthy and safe, dynamic and resilient, addressing climate change, and protecting and restoring natural systems.
We brought to you earlier in 2023 a lot of information about how we were thinking about housing policy, that housing affordability is kind of at the core of need within our region as it relates to housing policy, that there are influences that cause housing affordability, and that historically that's kind of where the council has focused most of its attention, but that there are also effects that happen because of housing affordability or unaffordability within our region. And in this presentation, you'll see that our objectives kind of span between influences and effects.
And just wanted to point out, in addition to some of the statute that we typically use to understand our role with the Regional Development Guide, I want to really credit Hillary for pointing out this important part of the statute that guides our work, which is that the guide really needs to look at both physical and social and economic needs of the metropolitan area and incorporate that. We really know that, traditionally we have a lot of interest in physical development of the region, but especially in our housing policy plan work and in a lot of the rest of the plan as well, we really want to focus in on those social aspects and on how people experience our economy within their own household as well, which is really important in housing. So we have our equity framework, our climate change work, environmental justice considerations, and we have homelessness and a lot of challenging experiences with housing access in our region that we're bringing into this plan.
Y'all are probably familiar at this point with the structure and the regional plan elements throughout all areas. Several other groups have also introduced some chapters within their policy areas. You may remember that Transit, I think, walked you through some of those at last committee of the whole. We also have decided to have kind of a structure within our document. Most of the questions we have for you today are about objectives, but we just want to real quick kind of let you know what we're thinking about in terms of structure of the document. We've been working from a lot of engagement, both done by our own staff and other policy areas at the council, to think about how, what we need to respond to in the housing policy plan in order for it to be meaningful for the residents of our region. We presented to you a couple of months ago some engagement themes, and we have since kind of added objectives within those larger categories. And the difference between this slide and the one I'm about to move to are just that we turned some of those engagement themes into larger areas for chapters to kind of hold similar types of content. So I'm just gonna go back and forth between them one more time, just so you can kind of like bring it together.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Councilmember Wolf.
So those 7 things on that slide are the ones you want us to tell you if you should combine them?
Yeah.
Thank
And
you
we'll
for that
get into a little
clarification.
bit more detail about each of them. Within each objective, we have a focus on, underneath that, kind of within the document structure, we're focused on the 3 Ps, which we borrowed from our friends in ES. And provide is something that we do kind of like with statutory authority. It's very clear that it's our role within the region. Plan is looking forward to the future, not necessarily addressing things exactly in the moment. And partner is something that we can do in coordination with other regional movers and shakers.
Yeah, so just being clear about where we have a direct role, where we have a role, but it's less direct and requires collaboration. And then as we present, at least at a high level, some of these early policy statement drafts for you, we may not have time to fully get all of your feedback, but just to give you some things to chew on and read over in the future, if not tonight too. The next several slides are all organized this way, with the chapter name, the objective title, a description of what our objective is, and a policy statement draft. And then under that, we show different kind of examples, they're not comprehensive, of where we are operating on recommendations for our technical advisory group, from resident engagement, and from our engagement with counties, cities, and kind of the metro cities convened planning group. The first one is proximity and choice. So looking at fair housing and geographic choice issues, people, regardless of ability, age, financial status, race, and family size, can live in a community they choose. So that's the objective description. And then the policy statement is develop policy, provide resources and funding, and support local, regional, and state initiatives that increase the ability for households to choose where to live in the region, regardless of ability, age, financial status, race, or family size.
Next, we have options to own and rent, kind of still within that first chapter. Rental and ownership options are available to all households regardless of income. The way that we kind of see this operationalizing is support and incentivize development, preservation, and maintenance of affordable housing units of all types of tenure, both renter, shared equity, and private ownership, that reflect the true cost burden experienced by residents. This will be kind of the area that considers more than just what someone pays for rent, but maybe also what someone pays in utility costs, all of those high energy costs that we were kind of just talking about with the earlier grant opportunity.
In the category of dignity and decency, looking at stability, we propose that safe, affordable, and dignified places to live are available to everyone, but especially those experiencing housing insecurity and homelessness. So that means to develop and support policy that makes it less likely for residents in the region to experience housing instability and homelessness, and focus support for people who are experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity currently.
Next, in our second chapter, we have quality. You may remember from the youth cohorts that spoke to you, I think it was last fall, talked a lot about quality of housing. Affordable housing is built and maintained to a high standard, safe and accessible for all residents. The way that we're thinking about operationalizing this is support and incentivize development, preservation, and maintenance of affordable units in all types that provide residents a safe, dignified, and healthy place to live. Assist and prevent loss of affordable housing that reaches the end of its affordability requirements, and support the development of more accessible units and universal design. The things that we normally hear from city staff around this are that they want people who are living in community to be able to age in community, and that it's really expensive to help people stay in their home longer or find a place to live when their needs become greater and they need live-in care.
So the next chapter, connection and well-being, looking at cultural connections and well-being specifically. Everyone has access to homes, not just housing. We hear that in a lot of different ways. We want to operationalize that by increasing the ability for residents to keep their homes, amenities, health, and/or their sense of belonging in a neighborhood.
Next, we have equity, focused kind of on what we have adopted in our regional economic regional equity framework. Repair historic and ongoing injustice in housing practices and outcomes. Limit the effect of historical injustices through reparative and community-centered action, and limit future disparities by shifting current policies to protect communities whose disparities are the largest. One way we've heard this from local governments is that they're taking this work kind of on a lot by themselves. The Just Deeds initiative, where cities have kind of banded together to agree not only to expunge racial covenants that are listed within property tax records, but also to think critically about how they might, with their current authority and powers, prevent any type of segregation from happening again is pretty important and fresh on their minds.
Yeah, and last but not least, and this connects really well to the previous presentation actually, housing in our region is resilient to climate change impacts and furthers environmental justice. That means supporting development and maintenance of homes to create a climate resilient future. And investing in energy efficiency of homes is one way to meet perhaps the interest we heard from our technical advisory group members about lowering utility costs, especially for low-income residents. We certainly heard a lot of interest from city and county leaders about this topic, and it was a major theme of all of our community engagement sessions.
I never expected to hear quite so much about parks and green space access without asking any direct questions about parks or green space access. So that just brings us to our questions. How would you improve any of these? Does this respond to what you're hearing from our most vulnerable populations? Do you see any objectives that could be easily combined or maybe dovetailed together?
Thank you for this work. Councilmember Lindstrom had to leave early, and I know Councilmember Bento needs to peel up fairly quickly. Did you want to say something?
If it's okay.
Yeah, please, yeah, and I appreciate
The questions.
committee members' patience. Yeah, we
Yeah.
had a couple of items that took a little longer than anticipated.
But they were important items.
Agreed.
Good discussion.
Thank you.
I kind of think that where were the stability and quality could possibly be combined, because I think they're kind of a chicken and the egg type combination in a way, but I'm sure that there's some good discussion to be had on that I'll miss for the time being, but I will come back and listen to the conversation that you all have. I would like to throw in here an issue that I think we need to be thinking about going forward, and it doesn't need to be a part of this conversation ad nauseum tonight or in the near future, but I think homeowner insurance issues are going to be a huge factor. I just went through having to get a new homeowner and new auto insurance policy because my former insurer is no longer doing business in Minnesota. And in the course of it, I learned that there are a lot of insurance companies that are not insuring certain kinds of housing, or they're escalating to the point where it's not affordable for the owners. So, and that's not an attack on the insurance industry. I don't want that to sound like an attack on the insurance industry whatsoever. We all rely on them, and it's important that that industry remain vibrant, but we're living in trying times, and with wildfires and extreme weather conditions, there are lots of claims going on. So that's one factor I want us to keep on the radar. The other is that as it relates to quality and stability, the recent articles, both in the newspaper and on social media and television about what's happening to the middle income, I think is something for us to pay attention to as well, because I think when we've got healthy housing options all through the spectrum of housing, it creates more choice and freedom for the people who need it. And the minute we start getting stuck and we don't feel like we can do what we want to do, you know, we've been through our 20s and 30s, and now we're ready to kind of step up a little bit, and we've just gotten a raise, and we think we can afford to maybe add on to the house or sell the house and buy a new one. You can't. So it's important for us to think about the people who really need housing now, no question. But I think we need to think about the people who are getting stuck throughout the spectrum, whose movement provides changes that help us going forward. I hope that made some semblance of sense, so thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Minto. Further discussion, responses to the questions? Councilmember Johnson?
Yeah, thank you very much for your hard work on this, and I'm going to weave in something that I've said before many times. I just wish in here there could be some sort of a statement that said that we lived in a society where people could earn living wages. You know, I'm going to continue to say everybody's looking at government, and that could be an overstatement, but it is no longer an overstatement to fix this problem. And it is a problem that everybody has a piece in it to solve for. And so, you know, I know we have a big role in this, and local governments have a big role in this, but I just think there has to be some recognition in this document that states the truth, and that is that in order for people to have prosperous and healthy lives with choice and all the things, regardless of what condition they bring forward in their life, that they have the opportunity to earn a living wage. And so I don't know how we present that in here, but I just feel like it's a moral statement that has to be made, because as the solutions continue to be pushed at legislatures across the nation and in Congress, we I think are missing a big piece of it, and I just had to say that.
Thank you. Further discussion,
Hillary was
Councilmember Carter.
Just a real ditto, and thank you.
Oh.
I appreciate that. I think it absolutely fits and could certainly enhance perhaps any of these areas, but dignity and decency in particular. I think that the whole issue of affordability clearly is not just about a unit. It is about how we can in fact pay for.
Everything.
Yeah, yeah. And the income that people have can make a difference, of course, in what's affordable. So I think it could enhance that particular area. Even adding to the objective statement itself, safe, affordable, and dignified places to live are available to everyone. And I don't want to say regardless of income, but I want to add something there that recognizes income as a factor, a variable.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up. And to that point, I'd like it woven in, but I want it, you know, the economic, the three concentric circles, I've been talking about that for a long time, since we focus so much in certain areas here, but that economic prosperity and what we try to do with Greater MSP and CEI and others is, I think, somehow lost in a lot of our documents. And when I brought it up before, and it's been woven into things. So but you know, anytime we put transit ways, we're looking at jobs and, you know, prosperity and hopefully not locking people into jobs that can't get them the income they need. You know, we have to make sure that these corridors have, you know, the private sector is working to provide, again, living wages throughout, not just the minimum wage jobs and all of that. So I think it is our role to make sure that economic prosperity is available to all in the region. And I would like to just see that somewhere elevated in a statement at the beginning of something, so that the reader has that in their mindset, that it was in our mindset. And Hillary, I don't know if you have anything to add. And I just want to say I really appreciate you, Hillary.
Oh, thank
You've
you.
brought a lot to this process, and I've learned a lot from you during my time at the council, so I just want to give you a heartfelt thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. We are working with the staff that are picking up the work on the regional economic framework. And just last week, in a meeting, Maya and Olivia brought up, you know, like how we need to talk about fair wages and living wages as part of this. We're still trying to find the right place to put this in the regional development guide, to be completely transparent, but we are starting a lot of research on the back end about how to tell this story kind of in the same breath, using data. So we're on it. We're not there yet.
And again, Mr. Chair, just in the acknowledgement or something at the beginning, just to acknowledge that we do not own the whole solution. There are many components we don't control, but we have a piece of, right? And so just keep, when you feel compelled, keep sending us your thoughts along the way, because
And I know we're
they're very,
just a
very
tad
much
on.
appreciated.
Yep, so thank you, excellent points. I have in queue Councilmembers Lee, Dolkar, Wolf, and then Carter. Councilmember Lee.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you adding, you calling out dignity. I feel like of the three the circles in the Venn diagram, it touches the social and the physical space. You know, for those of us who've been on welfare 25 years ago, I grew up on welfare in Fresno, California, and back then, if you haven't been on it, back then you got food stamps, and they're like paper voucher money, basically. And this was before the EBT cards. And so when you're in a line and you're using those things, there's a certain kind of a shame of that, the physicalness. And when we ensure that people have good, dignified homes, we remind folks that even if they are of lower income, that their living situations don't have to be less than the rest of us.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further comments, Councilmember Dolkar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll put all of this in writing, but there's a sort of high-level comment. So on slide number 12, I thought quality and actually climate resilient or decarbonized housing will go together really well. And instead of calling out affordable housing, you can say all housing at the spectrum. So that is inclusive of all housing. And then slide number 13, under connection and well-being, I thought cultural connection could also go with environment together. So most communities, connection to the culture or community is same as connection to the nature. So those combined, I think works really well. Under equity, I thought you could then do the second sub-bullet that actually calls out all affordable housing built or maintained or invested by Met Council or council, then it's decarbonized, it's safe and affordable. So that kind of reflects, again, double or emphasize under equity. And then environment, I will just leave it as it is, if you can combine it in different ways. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In looking under the options to own and rent, and, wait a minute. Is that the one I was looking at? Sorry, I've been listening to everybody else and I forgot about what I was gonna say. That you could, that you could rent or own, there are choices for everybody regardless of income. That's nice to say, but we've dealt with people in our HRA that have zero income. It's not possible to create home ownership with somebody for zero income. So maybe reword that a little bit. I mean, I like the idea of options, but it's impossible for us to provide ownership for somebody with an income of zero. It's just never going to happen.
Thank you. Thanks, Councilmember. Further comments? I'll recognize Councilmember Carter, then I have a couple things to say, and then maybe we're moving towards adjournment. Councilmember Carter.
Just really helpful to hear the thoughts that you've shared in the housing policy plan, and to hear our additional thoughts regarding level of income and affordability. I appreciate Councilmember Dolker's comment also about a range of housing, or the housing spectrum, and how that in fact reflects something different than the word affordability. So there are a lot of things that I know you're struggling with as you put this piece together for us, and I appreciate including as much as you can that helps to focus on the need for prosperity in our housing policy plan. But it's not just there, of course. So I appreciate the struggles and support all of those efforts, and we'll look forward to talking about living wage and earned income, and also wealth building and other aspects as we build the entire plan. And I just wanted to make sure to assert that we're not counting on you to do it all. Everything is connected to everything, but we just need to see the pieces there. Thank you.
Thank you, very helpful. Just a couple things looking at your questions. Could any objectives be combined? I think you're doing a great job of synthesizing down what you're hearing from the council and from the committee. So I'm guessing the answer would be yes. You've heard some guidelines here, but I look forward, or some input here, but I look forward to seeing what you come up with next. So I don't have any solid response, but again, I just think the work that you're doing is really well. And then the next two questions, I think my answers are kind of combined, and they really are consistent with what you've heard from other committee members. But I love that you use the term prosperity, Councilmember Carter, but I mean, to what you've heard a lot, and Councilmember Johnson and I kind of hit this note a lot as well, and to me, it does relate to housing policy. And my argument is always, we don't have so much an affordable housing crisis as we do sort of a crisis of wages and compensation. But how does that show up as we set regional housing policy? But I think it has to. I think that it has to. So just to support all of that. Ms. Lovelace, what really struck me was what you just said about parks and green spaces. And so then I was going back through some of your presentation and kind of looking for that emphasis or amplification. And I think that could be maybe lifted up. So if there's something that it needs more urgency or maybe response to regional goals, it's that connection as housing policy, right? I think that was very educational. Pretty much my notes are consistent with what others said, and then in the final question, and I was looking at this in the materials beforehand too, and you lift up the most vulnerable populations and issues there, and I think that's an interesting sector to lift up, and maybe we see that all the time, but for me it doesn't seem like we are always talking about that. But in my day-to-day life. That is a sector of the population that my work does focus on. And so maybe I'd like to hear more about that as we go forward and what we might want to do. And one of my frustrations, actually, before I even came onto the council, but it's for my now, 5 years on the Metropolitan Council, is the struggles we have regionally to address issues of the most vulnerable. To be super specific, people without shelter, people living outside, who I would say as far as housing policy goes, are the most vulnerable, or people without housing. And the system just resists a regional approach. And I've been in the last 5+ years part of probably half a dozen attempts to regionalize an approach, and there's systemic barriers. And so can we, through our housing policy documents, start to mitigate some of those barriers to some kind of regional approach to serve our most vulnerable populations?
Chair, if I could just on that point.
Councilmember Johnson, then Councilmember Wolf. I have a feeling people.
Living wages has to be part of it,
Agreed.
but also the total care that a human being needs throughout their life. So whether it's health, whether it's mental health, whether it's addiction, whether it's whatever it might be, we don't control that. It shows up, in our world at Met Council, but that needs to be somehow, I think, spoken to, that, housing alone isn't going to, that's a piece of getting somebody to land there, but having somebody to be on a pathway to well-being, we have a role in that. But more and more, I just think people think, well, if you give them a place and you put them there, they'll be okay.
Right.
And we need partners in that, and the counties are a big one in that. And so I just really wanted to lift that up, because especially as it relates to transit and some of the things, it's just not looked at comprehensively. So I don't know what, the regional solution to me is mind-boggling too, because it's multifaceted. And I think something in a big statement needs to be talked about, that multifaceted approach to a human being's life, and the things that we're facing in our world that we're trying to improve.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing that I'm not seeing in here is discussion about collaboration and community building. And that, I'm not just talking at the government level, but even like what we've been doing at the HRA, helping people learn how to talk to their landlord and communicate better so that you don't have problems.
Yes.
And that you both have sort of a shared investment in wherever you're living. Because that can go a long way towards making things easier for people. I mean, I had one kid move out of an apartment, stop paying his rent, left all his furniture. The landlord called me up and was like, "What's going on here?" And I figured out what was going wrong. Donated all the furniture, cleaned his apartment, and the landlord said, and paid the back rent. But the landlord said, "Well, if he ever wants to come back, we'd take him back." If you make that effort to fix a problem, landlords will go a long way with working for you. But a lot of the discussion in here is more along the lines of the landlord is the enemy, or you hear from the landlord that the tenant is the enemy, and we need to bring people together that they have kind of a shared interest in wherever it is that they're living.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. Yeah, Ms. Lovelace.
One of our planned audiences to reach out to in the next couple of months is county health and human services providers.
Oh, great.
And so we're hoping to create some more of those connections. We didn't want to guess, so.
Okay.
That's great.
It's coming.
It's very encouraging to hear. And Councilmember Wolf, I appreciate you bringing that up. As a landlord in the Phillips area myself, it's been such an interesting education. Because in my mind, tenants and landlords actually have more shared objectives than they do points of conflict. And as a landlord, I would prefer sometimes having new tenants, high school, people moving in just out of high school, because they hadn't really solidified that oppositional framework between landlord and tenant. And we could develop a relationship differently. But I think that's a really important point. And I appreciate you bringing it up. So if there's nothing else, Hillary, I just want to say thanks. I take it this is going to be your last time here in committee. It's been a joy working with you, and I appreciate your contributions to the division, to this committee's work, to the council, and to the region. So
Thank you so much, y'all. I hope you extend the same trust that you had in me to my colleagues. They're really great. I mean, I cannot speak highly enough about Sarah, Maya, and Olivia. So you'll see them next time.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Good luck in your next endeavors. Seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry we couldn't get to the last
this
item.
one,
I feel bad.
okay. Terry said we
That
could
just took a little longer than we expected.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's good that we can dig into some of these and have those deeper discussions, so.